Well, welcome to Marking the End Times. It's great to have you with us as always. And today I have something very exciting I want to talk about, and that is, has the biblical city of Sodom been discovered? The ancient city of Sodom. There are some saying that they found the ancient city of Sodom. There's been a lot about that really for the last several decades, but there's kind of a growing movement, and some are touting a certain site in actually in modern day Jordan and saying that is the city of ancient Sodom. So I want to talk about that because Sodom obviously is a very important city biblically, but I think it's an important city prophetically. There's a lot of connections Jesus makes between Sodom and the times of Lot and the end time. So I want to talk about this alleged archeological discovery that's taken place and kind of the evidence for that, and then the prophetic significance of it. In a little bit, we'll go into the subscriber-only section. I want to answer three questions. The first two are very related. The first one's about, are unbelievers in hell before they're resurrected? Then the second question is, will those who are called before God at the final judgment, will they be called up out of hell and then just sent back to hell? So I want to talk about hell and the afterlife, and I want to talk about the four parts of the underworld. A lot of people don't realize there's not just this one idea of hell. That's kind of the broad term, but there's actually four parts or compartments of hell. So I want to talk about that. And then finally, there's a question about heavenly rewards and our spiritual gifts, and what we can expect someday when we appear before the Lord. So we'll talk about those fascinating questions in our question and answer time. But I want to talk again about this alleged discovery of the city of Sodom. Now, last weekend, like maybe a lot of you, my wife and I went and saw the new Indiana Jones movie. And, I'd seen the four previous ones, so you had to go see the final one as well. And, I think, Harrison Ford now is about 80 years of age. So I don't know how many more of these movies there will be. But the Indiana Jones movies, though, again, just highlight this idea that people love the idea of, finding some ancient place or artifact. And there's been a lot of that alleged over the last years. There's been a view out there that the temple, Solomon's temple, wasn't up where the Temple Mount is today, but actually was down in the city of David. Now, the problem that is, the city of David's not large enough to hold it. And when Solomon took the ark up to the temple, he says, we're going to go up to the temple. So it has to be up higher. There's been, people who claim to have found an alternate site for Mount Sinai. So when people claim to have found new things or certain things there, we have to proceed with caution. But that's one of the things that's exciting about going to Israel, about a trip to Israel, is you see these ancient archeological sites, and they're being discovered all the time. There's a synagogue they found in the city of Magdala. They've actually found a second one that are from the first century when Jesus was there. Jesus would have been in those sanctuaries, in those synagogues. And it's fascinating to see them. So, there's an Israel trip that endtimes.com is taking in late November, early in December. So if you haven't signed up for that, I would encourage you to do that. It's a life-changing trip, and you see the Bible come to life. But there's an old saying I've heard through the years, and that is that archaeology doesn't prove the Bible, but the Bible proves archaeology. And again, you hear about people going over there, and they have their Bible in one hand and a shovel and a spade in the other hand, and they unearth these ancient places or artifacts because the Bible's always true. It always guides archaeologists to the proper sites. Now, years ago when I went to Israel the very first time, someone made the statement, they said, we're going to see a lot of sites while we're here in Israel, but one site you won't see is Sodom and Gomorrah because it's been wiped out. And then, for many years, there was question whether Sodom and Gomorrah actually existed. That's the way it is with a lot of things in the Bible. A lot of skeptics, they'll say this is just a legendary story. But back in 1976, an Italian scholar found a treasure trove of archives up in the northern part of Syria, a place called Ebla. And one of the tablets there had the names of 289 towns in all of that area. And one of the places that was mentioned was Sodom. So the idea of Sodom existing was confirmed by that discovery in 1976. Now, since then, Sodom has been one of the most searched for sites, really, in the land of Israel. Now, the traditional view that I always heard years ago was that Sodom was underneath the waters of the Dead Sea. If you've ever been there to Israel, it was underneath those waters and kind of down at the south end, and that it had all been covered up. Well, because of the drought in Israel and so much water being siphoned off from the Jordan River, the waters of the Dead Sea have receded significantly. And there's no evidence of any ruins down there at the southern end of the Dead Sea. But a lot of people still believe it's down there. There's a modern city down there south of the Dead Sea called Sodom, S-E-D-O-M. It's a modern industrial site where they collect potash and different minerals. So it's named Sodom down there in that southern part of the Dead Sea. Now, Sodom is very important because you think about the city of Sodom throughout Scripture, it's kind of a prototype of God's judgment. God compares his judgment over and over again in the Old Testament, and Jesus does so in the New Testament by referring back to Sodom and Gomorrah. So Moses refers to Sodom and Gomorrah in Genesis. Ezekiel in Ezekiel chapter 16, he refers to Sodom and Gomorrah. Isaiah refers to Sodom and Gomorrah. Jeremiah refers to Sodom and Gomorrah. Jesus speaks of Sodom and Gomorrah 3 times. And one time he talks about how in the end times it's going to be like the days of Lot. The Apostle Peter in 2 Peter chapter 2 refers to Sodom and Gomorrah. Jude, the half-brother of Jesus, refers to Sodom and Gomorrah. So it's found throughout Scripture. And we know that the ancient city of Sodom was somewhere in the vicinity of the Dead Sea. It was down in that area, but where? And it's kind of like putting together a puzzle to find it. Now, there's 2 different sites that have been discovered that people claim to be Sodom, and people kind of take sides on these 2. But there's one up on the north end of the Dead Sea that's been getting a lot of attention. There's one really well-known ministry now that's kind of promoting a book and a video by a man named Steve Collins. And he claims that this site about 8 miles north and east of the Dead Sea in modern-day Jordan, that is the ancient site of Sodom. Now, Steve Collins started digging there, as far as I can tell, about 2009. And there was an article in Biblical Archaeology Review in 2013 that I read 10 years ago where he claimed to have found Sodom. He came out with a book and a video on this about 7 years ago in 2016. And again, it's being kind of promoted pretty broadly again today. The site is called Tel El Hammam. It's about a 100-acre area of a city. So it would have been a mega city back in that day. And that city fits the geography actually fairly well. Because if you go back and read in the book of Genesis, in Genesis 13, verse 10, it says, "And Lot looked out and saw the whole plain of the Jordan, all the way to Zoar, was well watered like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah." So he sees the well-watered plains of Jordan, which would seem to place it north of the Dead Sea. So the geographical location fits very well. It also fits well because there was catastrophic judgment there. I mean, something catastrophic happened. Let me read something from online about this place called Tel El Hammam. It says, archaeologists found widespread evidence of an intense conflagration that left the Middle-Age bronze city in ruins. They found scorched foundations and floors buried under nearly 3 feet of dark gray ash, as well as dozens of pottery shards covered with frothy melted surface. The glassy appearance indicates they were briefly exposed to temperatures well in excess of 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, the approximate heat of volcanic magma. Such evidence suggests the city and its environs were catastrophically destroyed in a sudden extreme conflagration. A very high-heated conflagration comparable to a nuclear explosion which destroyed the city and killed its inhabitants instantly. The skeletal remains likewise provide ample evidence that the inhabitants were protecting themselves from being incinerated. Some say it's a blast 1,000 times stronger than the atomic bomb at Hiroshima. Rooftops were melted and there was disintegrated pottery. And the city wasn't occupied for 500 years after that. And the vegetation in the area seems to have been destroyed. So it fits well. Some things, it's kind of like something happened. There was an explosion above the city that basically just incinerated it. Now, there's a couple problems, though, with this view that's being touted by so many today. And again, Steve Collins in the video, he walks through the gates and says, "Welcome to the ancient city of Sodom." But one problem is that the site there at Tel El Hammam, it was uninhabited for about 600 years, but it was re-inhabited. And if you read in the prophets, like in Jeremiah chapter 50 and verse 40, and in Isaiah 13 and verse 19, it says that these ancient places, Babylon, will be destroyed like Sodom and Gomorrah and never be inhabited again. So it seems to be this idea that when something's destroyed like Sodom and Gomorrah, nobody lives there anymore. It's uninhabited. And so the idea that this city was inhabited 600 years later seems to go against it being Sodom. Another problem is the chronology or the dating. This city, Tel El Hammam, was destroyed in about 1650 BC. Well, Abraham lived back around 2000 BC. In fact, if you take the biblical chronology literally, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah was in 2067 BC. So this is about 400 years too late to be the destruction back in Abraham's day. So to make this site fit, you have to shorten the lives of the patriarchs, and you have to shorten the time that the Jewish people were in Egypt. And I don't feel comfortable doing that. So it just doesn't fit the chronology or the idea of the city not being inhabited again. Now, there's another site down south of the Dead Sea called Bab Edra. And that's called the Southern Sodom theory. And it was, when you go down there today, it's covered by a layer of ash several feet thick. It's never been re-inhabited. It's surrounded by wasteland. Also, there's a city nearby named Numera, which a lot of times in Arabic, the N and the G can be changed, so Numera could easily be Gomorrah. So that's been another site that's been looked at. Many people are adamant that this is the location. But again, the problem here is that city was destroyed in 2350 BC, about 300 years too early to be in the time of Abraham. So I don't think the evidence really fits either one of these places, the chronological evidence. Now, I have to say that finding Sodom would be a huge discovery. But I would also say this, not finding Sodom could also be very significant. Because God says in Genesis chapter 19, verse 24 and 25, that the city of Sodom and Gomorrah were overthrown. Literally, that can mean turned upside down. In other words, so completely destroyed that maybe they will never, ever be found. But Sodom, wherever it is, stands as a mute testimony to the terrible consequences of sin, especially the sin of homosexuality. And really, there's three simple points here of how this points to the end times. First of all, Jesus said it'll be like the days of Lot when he comes back. It'll be like the conditions of Sodom during that time. And we see that in our country today. I mean, this week we just celebrated the 247th anniversary of our great republic. But we see the sins of Sodom rampant here today. In fact, even worse than there, all the gender confusion and transgenderism. So it's a sign of the times. Sodom and Gomorrah also is a picture of the end times and the judgment that will come, the catastrophic judgment of the tribulation and the return of Jesus. And then finally, Lot's delivery. Remember, he was delivered, Lot and his two daughters and his wife, from the city of Sodom. Now, his wife looked back and was destroyed. She was turned into a pillar of salt. But Lot was rescued from the city before the judgment, which I believe is a beautiful foreshadow or a picture or a type of the rapture. God's going to come and deliver his people from this evil world before he unleashes the Sodom-like destruction in the end times. So you and I need to live in anticipation, in eager anticipation and expectation of the coming of Jesus Christ, because the times are ripe. We're living in the days of Lot. And just like Lot was extracted before that judgment came, Christ is going to come and take us to heaven. That's a picture of the rapture. And I pray it'll happen very soon. Let's go now to the subscriber-only section. Again, I'm going to answer these questions about hell and the underworld and about heavenly rewards. If you're not a subscriber, you can go to endtimes.com, and for $7 a month, you can become a subscriber, and we'd love to have you. Well, let's go now into the Q&A session.